Good evening, everybody. Nice to see you. Welcome on behalf of Welsh Athletics. We'll give everyone another minute or two because I can see some people still coming in. So hopefully you've got choc ice because it's very hot outside. If you're watching this back on YouTube, it's that hot day that thunderstorms were threatened. So I've just had to put a sheet over the window so I don't get sunshine glare, but it might start raining and we might lose power mid-sentence. So I apologise in advance for any interference. Okay, we'll just give it another couple of seconds. Okay, let's get cracking. Welcome everybody on behalf of Welsh Athletics. As I say, this is my name's Finn. I'm the National Talent Development Coordinator. If you didn't know already from seeing me all through lockdown everywhere, I'm a National Talent Development Coordinator for jumps and combined events. I'm a coach. I'm a coach currently at an athletics club, Rumley Valley, and so I coach kind of small ones up to big ones, and I coach Commonwealth Games athletes, and I'm involved in the coaching process of some Olympians and some other Commonwealth Games athletes in different event groups as well. So that's the kind of planning I do is kind of once a week, 1 hour, little ones, right the way through to full-time Commonwealth Games and Olympians. So that's my kind of planning background. I was also an international athlete, and that's it really. So a bit of housekeeping. If you've got any technical problems that hopefully aren't due to the weather, pop those in the chat. If you've got any questions for the end, we'll take questions. I know I've aimed this kind of 12-year-old to 16-year-old, but I'll take questions on anything planning related. And if I don't know the answer, which is possible, I will certainly get back to you. I know a lot of kind of coaches and part of a lot of kind of coaching groups, so we can discuss it in one of those, and you know, I'll let you know over email kind of what the results are. So yeah, so questions go in the question box, and that's it really. So hopefully you've got chalk ice or something cool to cool you down. Development period mesocycle planning. So this one, I just got to do the usual thanks to my colleagues at Welsh Athletics and to Zoe Brown for this one. She's helped me a lot, especially in the last 24, 48 hours. She's helped me with a lot of this kind of the sparkle because I was a bit stuck. So she's, as usual, she's led the way. So thanks very much, Zoe. Okay, so the aims. This is kind of hopefully going to be a decent resource for those taking the coach course or in the process of that coach education, because I've got a couple of slides that are really relevant to that education. So it's a good resource for that. It's also, we're going to explain what session plan is. We're going to start from the top and work down. So we're going to start with a year and go back down to a mesocycle, which is what this webinar is about technically, and then right down to one session. So we're going to start big and bring it more and more kind of condensed, and talk about SMART goals. So if we're planning something, we need some goals to plan towards. We're going to talk about some skill introduction and when to introduce skills at different events and different times. And we're also going to look at training principles, components of fitness, and the fit factors, because they underline how training actually works. So we need to know about those things for us to make training work. Okay, so we'll start with the UK athlete development model, which we've hopefully seen a few times before, just so we know that what we're planning for this age group is relevant content. So if you look at sport focus in the second column down, we've got multi-activity there. So if we're looking, say, 12 to 16, the ages are along the top there. But multi-activity, multi-event, so we're hopefully encouraging children to carry on in all their different sports, in netball, in hockey, in rugby, in football, as well as some multi-event athletics. And I know that's not always the done thing, but this is the research backed up by, if we want children to stay in the sport, then multi-event activity is the most helpful. It's okay, we might include some other stuff outside that multi-event activity if we need a bit more endurance or a bit more speed, but we also try and keep this multi-event activity going right the way up until kind of mid to late teens. Okay, so at the performance level, the Olympic motto, CTS averages 40th, faster, higher, stronger. And then so therefore in our training, that's kind of what we're looking for, to become faster, to become higher, to be able to jump higher, and to become stronger. But missing from this, if we're talking about training, I had to look up the Latin for this. Now that's the Latin for skill learning. So athletics is a lot about skill learning. We tend to think about being big, strong, fast, be able to run a long way for, very quickly, or kind of endurance type stuff, or speed. But athletics is massively about skill. Even if you're an endurance runner, the skill that you use to run, your technique, your biomechanics, contributes so much to your actual overall performance. So we'll start with learning skills. We'll go on, because we need to think about what goes into our plans before we actually talk about the plans. So when we're learning skills, athletics is a highly skillful sport, as we just mentioned. We need 10,000 hours to become an expert in anything. So we must practice for hours. As coaches, we must guide athletes, and we've got to adapt that way we guide the athletes to suit the athlete's needs. So if the athlete is a beginner or hasn't tried this task before, they might be a bit clunky. You might need to adapt your coaching style. And the same thing if they're an advanced athlete, and everything in between. So we talk about there being 3 stages of learning: cognitive, associative, and autonomous, and from beginning to advanced. So if our learner is at cognitive stage, they're very thoughtful, they're thinking about everything, nothing is automatic. Then as they become more associated with the movement, it's associative, so it's kind of mid-ground. So our coaching style will change again, a bit more questioning, encouraging some self-analysis, encouraging some intrinsic feedback. And then autonomous, they're a bit more automatic. And then we kind of had to flip back our coaching against, because maybe they're doing something automatically, they're not even thinking about it. We might need to point that out every now and again. So we might need to go back to the telling, even though we thought that we left that behind. So we've got to adapt our coaching right the way across, and then we kind of switch the coaching back to the simple stuff right at the very top. So that's our skills, and we'll touch on when to introduce skills a bit later on, because as I say, that will be very relevant for your coach education homework. Components of fitness. So if we look at KJT there, those are our components: fitness, speed, and strength, which together make power. We need to have good endurance, flexibility, and good coordination in order to arrange our limbs in order so we can jump high or throw a long way. The way that training works, so this is the thread that runs through all of our training. We need progressive overload. So that's progressive overload physically, as well as overloading those skills progressively, or progressing the skills. So we don't just keep the skills at the same level, we then progress them to make them slightly more complex, but then the athlete should have adapted to that. So then we need recovery and adaptation physically in order to become better. And we need to make our training specific. So we need to add specificity, and then that depends when we add that specificity, that's 2 in a row, through the season. What time of the season means what type of activity. Is it more general, or is it more specific towards a competition? So if we're talking physically, this is the standard fitness progressive overload model. So our baseline fitness is a dotted line right the way through the middle there. And that wave is where we apply training is where it's high, and then our body goes down. We need to adapt and recover back up again, and then we apply stress again. If we apply stress too quickly, we end up on that downward spiral. So we overtrain, probably get injured. If we add the same stress, we allow enough recovery, but we just add the same stress again and again and again, we just continue that baseline fitness. If we progressively overload that stress, then you can see that wave suddenly gets a bit bigger and a bit bigger over time. Now, every season, we can only make that wave go a certain amount. So we don't want to overtrain. As I say, if we overtrain, we go back down, but we don't want to be 365 days a year really going for it, because over a year, we only want so much progress. And then that sets us up for the next year and the next year. So in order to provide this overload progressively, we alter one factor at a time. So we either alter frequency, intensity, or the time or duration for which we're training for. So put simply, if I'm training once a week, then frequency means I'll train twice a week. And if I'm talking about intensity, obviously just train a bit harder for that 1 time a week. And if I'm talking time, instead of 1 hour, I'm going to train for 2 hours. But we don't alter any 2 of those factors at once, we just 1 at a time. So if I'm training twice a week, I keep it at 1 hour each time. And then I maybe make one 2 hours, but then I don't also then make that more intense. I keep the same intensity, but make the duration longer. So just alter one of those factors at a time is the golden rule for hopefully not getting injured. So just a small percentage increase in the frequency, the intensity, or the duration each time to provide that progressive overload. Now, deload. Some of you may have heard the term deload week. This is fairly important. As you can see from the dotted line that goes up through the middle, the overall load over the year steadily progresses. But in our training week, we might go an easy week, which is just below the line. We might go a medium week on the line. We might go then a high intensity week, and then we do a deload week. So we rest. What happens during that resting period is our body overcompensates. So it makes that next week of training after that even more effective. So then if we train that next week, we get an extra compensation, so on top of our previous performance. And so we need to keep altering this intensity in order to make bigger gains. If we just do the same thing and keep overloading linearly, that won't work. We need to provide that variation so we get that super compensation effect. So often athletes will feel bad. I've got a week, we can still learn skills during that deload week. It's just we take away the volume of work, of load. So we take away the reps or the distances. So athletes will often feel guilty or feel bad that they're not training or feel like they need to. They need to make them understand that their body needs to compensate. So let's get a bit more onto the planning and the goals. So a goal without a plan is just a wish. I hear a lot of wishes from athletes. So we're good at these outcome goals, these performance goals. We're good at saying, oh, I want to beat so-and-so, I want to be Welsh champion. I want to, make, as I put there, make the final at the British Championships. We're quite good at those goals, and we're quite good at the goals that say next season I'm going to run whatever. I'm going to run 220 for the 800, as I put there, depending on your age. I'm going to jump 170 in a high jump. I'm going to throw a personal best. We're really good at those goals, but a goal without a plan is just a wish. So we're good at wishing that. If you talk to most of the athletes I talk to, they'll give me plenty of times, but they're not going to tell me what these process goals are at the bottom, what they're going to do tomorrow and the next day in order for them to reach these performance goals, which helps them then really reach their outcome goals. So the process goals are the most important. What you're going to do next week, the week after that, and the week after that in order to make your performance goals and outcome goals come true and not just be wishes. So we talk about our goals being smart. So if I go back one screen, an outcome goal, that might be make the final at the British Championships next year. That could be a smart goal. Because as you know from business, you've probably seen this before. So I'll remind you what that stands for. Specific. So what is my specific goal? Measurable. How can I measure that? Agreed, we say in athletics. So is that, does the coach and athlete agree? We've got to agree on a goal together with the athlete, because we want to be athlete-centered, not just as coaches giving them a goal, what we think they're going to do. We have to be realistic. We'll talk about realistic in a minute, because we've only got a certain amount of weeks. We've only got a certain amount of physical ability, and sometimes our goals aren't quite realistic, especially if we think about athletes during that age bracket who are going through a lot of growing. So growing takes a lot of energy for one, and it also completely changes biomechanics. It completely changes coordination. So we might need to be realistic about how much gains are we going to make during this year if you're going to go through 3 growth spurts. Okay, and our T in our smart means time phased. So if I go back, my outcome goal, make the final at the British Championships next year, that could be a smart goal, because it's specific, it's measurable. You can see if you made it or not. It's agreed. Hopefully you agreed that with your coach. It's real. Let's assume it's realistic, and time phase. We've got 1 season to get there, so that is a smart goal. But in order to get that smart goal, we need to set some smart process goals to just step up each time, 1 step every time. Okay, so I've got my piece of paper. Now I think, right, I'm going to start my plan. I've got my goal. So first of all, I've got to think about who. So who have I got? Who's my athlete? What stage are they at? What kind of fitness level are they at? Are they injured? Are they returning from another sport? You've just got to think about who you've got in front of you. That's the most important thing. You can't start anything without that. Aims. We talk about SMART goals. So what are your aims as an athlete and coach pair? The age group we're talking about, you're probably more than likely to have a group. So I'm talking about individuals at the moment. And we'll go on to kind of the what you could do shortly. But aims and SMART goals might be as a group. It might be kind of skill-related goals. Hopefully we can all learn these skills. And as we go, there'll be lots of little SMART goals. But we need to know our overall aims for the whole season, first of all. What? So we create the plan. Then now, once we've got an athlete and a SMART goals, we create the plan. Then we do the plan. Then we see how it goes. Because no matter how good the plan is on paper, no matter how much you think you know, we need to monitor that progress, because then we need to assess and review it and see if it worked. So we assess and review quite often. It might be at the end of a microcycle, which is a 2-week period. We'll explain this shortly. It might be at the end of our mesocycle, which we're saying today is going to be 6 to 8 weeks. It might be then we review what happened. Are we where we thought we were going to be? What worked? What didn't work? And it rarely always works. And so if you set out all your 8-week blocks at the very start of the winter, you might need to rip up the 2nd, 3rd, 4th, and 5th after 4 or 6 weeks, because they're not relevant anymore. They haven't made sense, or things haven't worked. There's been an injury. So don't plan too far ahead. Have it in mind, but don't plan too far ahead. So this all forms part of this plan, do, review process, and it's that honest review that's really important as coaches, that we review with our athlete, with our coaching assistant, how did that honestly go? Because no matter how good that session looks on paper, or how good that worked for Seb Coe, showing my age, or Usain Bolt's training program won't necessarily work for John Smith, your 12-year-old athlete. Right, so I said I'd explain these kind of micro, meso, macro cycles. This is a kind of, I tried to create my own one of these, but I just pulled this off the internet and changed a few of the words. But if that's our 1-year cycle, so that's what we call a macro cycle. And we've got some phases of training. I know there's a spelling mistake there, but they've corrected that down below, but not in the one above. But so we've got a general preparation phase and then kind of a competition phase. And then the sub phases of that, we go general preparations at the start of winter, and we'll go on to what that might look like shortly. Specific preparations become a bit more specific, look a bit more like athletics. Then pre-competition look very much more like athletics, and maybe be using the implements or the hurdles or the actual equipment that you're going to use in the competition. And then you've got your competitive. And that will change kind of depending on who you've got. That will change every year possibly, or it might look different for different athletes. Below that, then we've got the mesocycles, which is our focus today. So we've got kind of an 8-week block, 6 to 8 week block. We say 6 weeks because that's about how long the body takes to adapt to any new stimulus. So we say 6 to 8 weeks of kind of a couple of skill introduction cycles during that, and then physically as well, over 6 to 8 weeks. Is that how we adapt? Kind of only small adaptations, but that's how long it takes. And then below that, we've got microcycles. It might be a week or 2 weeks. And then below that, again, we've got session plans, single session plans that you can give to anybody and say, deliver this session for me, because hopefully your session plan is that well thought out that anyone can deliver it. And I know in reality that's not necessarily the case, because we have jobs, we are not professional coaches, we are volunteers, so especially in Wales, so well, all over. So I'm realistic, because I do deliver on coach education, and I am very realistic when someone is asked to produce a mesocycle and session plans, and I realise in real life they may not do that, but we have to suggest that this is best practice. So you see it at the bottom there, general at the start of the winter, and moving more and more specific as we go through, as we already said, and kind of starting to pick up equipment and things as we go. So some important questions when you're thinking about this yearly plan. So how much time do you, the coach, have to support your athlete? Do you go on regular holidays as a coach? And I'm a bad one for it. I'm never like to say no. I always like to help athletes. But sometimes you've got to be realistic. Well, all the time you've got to be realistic. You say, look, I'm not going to be here for Christmas. I'm not going to be here then. So we don't want to put in our plan lots and lots of technical work that you need to be there for, that you actually physically can't be there for. And then how much time does your athlete have? So, because if you're away the first 2 weeks of the summer, and then your athlete's away the second 2 weeks, that's a month that you're not training. So instead of 12 months training, you've now got 11 months. Things like that, little things like that you don't think make a difference, but they make a huge difference when you actually count up the days you've got in that year. So if normally you've got, say, 33 weeks to prepare, once you've scratched out all of these, holidays, families, work, study, sport, other sports, general life, girlfriends, boyfriends, birthdays, you may only actually have 20 weeks. You know, by the time you've crossed off those training days, when athletes can actually make it to training, when's the track open, when's the gym open, these make a huge difference. So you've got to be really realistic about this. Will growth play a factor? That's a big one. So no matter how well you plan, I've got athletes that are just constantly growing at the moment. You can't really plan much. You can do the skill work, so we always continue that skill work, and I've got an example of that in a minute. So always continue that skill, but we're just always waiting to kind of add a bit of load, because the athletes to become more successful at a young age, not that that's very important, but to them it is, to their families it is, to you as a coach it is really, but in order to get that success you need to kind of add some load somewhere. But you've really just got to look after the athlete as a human being first and foremost. Don't worry about performance, don't worry about this and that. Always have the big picture in mind, always have the long game in mind for their own benefit. Because otherwise you're just going to have a couple of handfuls of injured athletes, and you'll lose them from the sport. Okay, so be realistic. Some other considerations. Where is the athlete now, as we said? Are they just returning from injury? Are they just coming off football for a whole season and then they're coming into athletics? Where are they now? Where does the athlete need to be at the end of this 8-week block in order to run that time for 800 meters in the summer? Where do they need to be after this block, physically and technically? So what technical things do I need to do? Which is what technical skills underpin this is the next line. So technically, what do I want this athlete to look like? This is something we always forget about. What do I want them to look like when they're on the track? Not just how fast, what do they look like? Are they going to be safe, robust? Sorry, I've got a fly. Safe and robust through the season, or are they going to get injured quickly? So what technical skills do I need to be working on here, which then in the next 8-week blocks can then progress, which can progress again and again. And then in the season they look like this. So don't forget those technical skills. Again, I'm realistic in the time that you've got to plan, but it's very important how you think about these technical skills underpinning all of the actual track times. What's physical skills? So we talked about kind of times and what time you're going to run for 200 or what time you're going to run over the hurdles in training. But I mean, what physical preparation skills? So if I need to run faster, maybe I need to have a stronger core or stronger legs. If I need to throw a long way, I might need kind of stronger legs. So what physical skills are going to underpin this, and technical skills, not just actually event skills, but just these physical prep skills, your usual movements, which we'll talk about in a minute. And then if it's not aligned to the goal, it's wasting time. That's kind of harsh, because I'm all for athletes trying lots of different things randomly, playing lots of different sports. But if it's in terms of behavior or intent, your job as a coach is to make your objectives with your athletes so clear. So you should be so clear with each other that every training session, if you might only have an hour on a Tuesday, hour on a Thursday. So if your intent isn't spot on, if you haven't set that up properly as a coach, you might waste half an hour every session, kind of. Which certainly isn't aligned to the goals. So you've sat down and made these goals, but then you're kind of both, going off in all different directions by with distractions. So, and like I say, I don't mean other sports and things like that, but I just mean your behaviour and your intent when you're actually training. Make that, of course, make it fun, but make it purposeful. Right. So this is one of those slides that will really help you with that coach course homework, the homework you get between day 3 and day 4, when on day 4 you come and present your mesocycle, or a development period as we call it now. So I talked about these technical skills that underpin your actual performance goals. So let's take the one at the top of the run. So by the end of the development period, so I'm making it smart because I'm giving it a time. Maintain correct foot cycle motion in 4 out of 6 reps during the session. So I've given myself a bit of growing room, so probably be a bit more realistic. And so, yeah, so that is a smart goal. So it's a smart technical goal. So I'm not mentioning time or anything like that. It's just a smart technical goal, which then we can progress in the next block. Same with the throw. Let's take the throw by the end of the development period. Throw with correct step back technique in 5 out of 8 throws, legs working before arms. So my goal in the summer might be to glide shot put a certain distance. So by the end of this mesocycle, I need to do the step back technique, which is kind of a precursor to the glide, 5 out of 8 times. So it doesn't have to be perfect, but in order for it to be, good in the season, it's got to be this far along by the time we get to the end of this development period. It might not be, in which case we just readjust the goals and carry on. But hopefully that's what we're working towards, a smart goal at the end of each session. So a little technical smart goal. And I mentioned the physical prep, so we need a little physical prep goal to run alongside this as well. Again, this is kind of straight out of the, well, it's very relevant to the coach education course. So that's what the kind of thing we're looking for in your homework. And as is this, because this might be quite confusing if you're coming from the outside, so don't let it put you off. But this, for your coach education homework, we talk about skill introduction, skill reinforcement, and skill development. So at the very, very start, we put our Latin quotes up. Skill learning is massively important in athletics, in any athletics. So skill introductions, say heel to glute movement during our running drills. Very simple run skill introduction, and then skill reinforcements mean basically to practice it. So the first week we practice it, second week we practice it again. First week the coach is making observations, and then they change their coaching style. We talked about where you are on a stage of learning. The second week, I've just put an example that the coach generates some feedback then. So there is asking open questions then, the coach, to kind of encourage self-analysis. So the coach moves along their coaching style as the athlete learns the skill. Then we go on to skill development. So we then add a bit more complexity to that skill. So here I've put that we dorsiflex the toes as well as doing the heel movements. We develop that skill, then we practice, skill reinforcement being practice. So in terms of overload, we don't want to introduce too many skills in too many elements every week. So if I put the skill introductions in green, I've got a skill introduction on week 1 in the running, but for my jump and throw elements that week, I've just got some practice from previous learning. Then I've got throw skill introduction in the second week, but then the run and the jump is just practice from previous. And then the third week, I've got some skill development, which is quite taxing as well. So it's almost like a new skill. So alongside that, my run and my throw, they're just practice what we've already learned. So we don't want to introduce new skills in every single element of our training every week, because that just loads mentally is tiring and physically tiring. So we don't want to overload the athlete with all this different kind of skill development and skill introductions. Just drip feed it in all the way, and all should be aligned with this golden thread, all aligned to our SMART goal at the end. So again, that slide is very relevant for our coach education, but hopefully not too confusing. And please, we can discuss this over email or phone call or whatever. If you're struggling at the time of going through your coach education, give me a shout. Okay, so this is a bit more relevant perhaps. So this is a rough example of a 6-week development period. Now, those of you who see my other webinars know that I don't stop banging on about multi-events and being multi-events for everybody right up until kind of late teens. And as we saw from the athlete development model at the start, yeah, that kind of concurs with what I think. So if I just give you a second to take that in, but don't worry too much. The different colours are different weeks. So we're assuming you've got 2 sessions, hopefully about an hour and a half each week. That's the perfect world. Like I say, I coach some groups that are just 1 hour at the moment, certainly often 2 hours, but at the moment, straight after the pandemic, we've got 1 hour, 1 time a week. And that's very hard to plan for. So this is assuming you've got 1 hour and a half twice a week, Tuesday, Thursday, say is the standard days. And this is maybe how I would start the winter. So with athletes kind of 11 to 16, a bit of everything. But when I put, say, week 1 shot put and hurdles, I don't mean in the circle throwing the shot put. I mean push throw movements, medicine ball, different drills, hurdles, just running over obstacles, or hurdle type movements, skips over barriers or skips over sticks on the floor or over cones, that type of eventing. So not specifically that event, certainly not until after Christmas, you know. So, and where I've got a throw and a run, or a jump and a throw and a hurdles, if I'm missing something, if I haven't run, jumped and thrown in the main session, then I've put that bit in the warm-up. So part of the warm-up might include a game of basketball, because then I've covered my throwing, you know, if I haven't got any throwing in the main session. So there's always ways to squeeze in run, jump and throw every session. And I've broken this down again even further shortly. So I've got, say, an example of 1 session if you kind of want to see a bit more detail. But again, I can send these slides to you if you want to, but it's just a way of covering every event. But you can see they all go together. Hurdles goes with everything, which is why I do it every single week. You can see here there's hurdles in there all the time, because hurdles is jumping, is running, there's speed in there, there can be endurance in there. If you go over hurdles, low hurdles multiple times, you can build that in as endurance. It's great hip mobility for all the events, and I'll show you quite a relevant picture after this one. So hurdles I love as a coach of all ages. It just helps with proprioception, helps all the skills and the movements where you glute to heel to glute, and then that kind of circular movement I was talking about as being a running skill, that is magnified in the hurdles, because you have to make it kind of a bit bigger and then you have to extend. So hurdles is great, which is why it's in there all the time. But as I say, in the warm-up I've got ABCs, fundamental movements, and then I've stuck in whatever's missing from the main session. And then the physical prep element, I'll get more specifics soon, but our fundamental movements in athletics, let me just put this next bit up. So the themes of development, say for the start of winter, ABCs, we've talked about all of these, but the quality of fundamental movements, we've got squat, hinge, lunge, brace, push, pull, rotate. So those are what we call our fundamental movements of athletics. So if we look back, wrong one. If we look back, in our physical prep, I've covered all of those movements, just a little bit of each in each session across. So we've got all of our fundamental movements of athletics. And so in nearly every event, we see nearly all of those movements. Even in endurance running, we'll see it. Even in a throw is very, very similar to a run. If we talk about traveling across the circle, sometimes it's a high knee action. If we're rotating, there's lots of similar movements, pushes and pulls, and lunges is moving from one leg to another. So that's in all the events. In all the events, we're on one leg most of the time. So they're all very relevant movements. So the physical qualities we develop through this mesocycle as well are strength and speed, flexibility, progressive technical skill development. We talk about being progressive in our physical, but also in our technical development. Run, jump, throw all the time, as I said. There's a great resource on 365, Athletics 365. I know it's difficult sometimes to get through, but it's a great resource. It's all there, and you can break it down into, do your running, and you can just break it down stage by stage. What do I need to be doing at the end of the first stage, and then what do I need to be doing at the end of the second stage? It's put in colours for you, so it's all there. And then how would this differ when coming into competition phase? So if I'm looking, I'm very, very general here, because as I said, hurdles doesn't mean hurdles, triple jump doesn't mean triple jump. It means just hopping and jumping. If I'm saying triple jump, multiple hops and jumps. If I'm talking about javelin, I'm talking pull throws, different types of pull throws. So I'm not talking directly about that movement. So how might that differ when I come to competition phase? Well, if this is the first 6 weeks, and then we go another 6-week block of this maybe, and then another one, and then we get to after Christmas and we have some children, I'm probably going to focus on this season, I'm going to do some hurdles and some throwing. So maybe we just start making those movements a bit more specific. We keep the other movements in there. We don't necessarily have to put a javelin in their hand if they're not going to be competing in a javelin. Of course, we still throw and catch as part of all of our training. We don't necessarily need to give them some competition equipment. So we just become a bit more specific, and maybe then we swap a discus day for a pull throw day. Maybe we just swap it around a bit. So we just become a bit more specific. It doesn't need to alter a lot. Still need to cover all of these bases, but maybe we just repeat some of the sessions, so we're doing them once a week, the important events, rather than once every couple of weeks. So then next winter we return to it again, because we're always learning our fundamental movement skills, we're always learning coordination, balance, agility. So we should be able to just pick it up when we get to next winter, we're back into it again. And I'll tell you why, because this is a perfect example. This is what I think about whenever I'm thinking about, whenever anyone says to me, oh, but my 12-year-old son wants to do the shot put, and this is what I think about every time. It's Robert Harting, after he won the London Olympic Games in the discus. You can see that hurdle technique. He's doing a trail leg drill there. He's spent a lot of time hurdling. So you can't tell me that when he was 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, he wasn't going over hurdles. As I say, it doesn't matter what your build is, or it doesn't have to be the highest competition height hurdle. It just has to be moving over barriers, helping that agility, balance, coordination, those fundamental movement skills right the way through your training. Just because you don't necessarily want to do it as an event at the moment, maybe the way you grow, you might end up being a great 400-meter hurdler where you thought you were going to be, a long jumper. So, or never count yourself out of that. You've got to keep your skills going. Athletics is a highly skillful event. It's not just about working hard. So in our planning, think about those skills. Right, so we've gone kind of the year, and then we've come down a bit, and then we're going to come down a bit again, and then we're talking about one training session. So if I'm trying to create a training session, again, we go through this in coach education, the session plan template. So what do we need to think about? We need to think about who we've got, where we're going to do it, what kind of, if we've got grass, if we've got wet grass, if we've got a track, if we've got a road, if we've got a car park, risk assessment, what we're going to do. So what we're going to do in terms of goals and in terms of our training program and in terms of where we want to get to. And that's also the why. So why are we doing that now? Is it aligned to the strategy? You know, if it's not aligned, is it a waste of time? Okay. If it's fun, okay, leave it in. But if it's fun, make it relevant fun. Make it deliberate play. Make it so it's relevant to align to your goals. And then how are we going to deliver that as coaches? What's our coaching style going to be? What level is our athlete at? So we've got the who. How are we going to develop to? How are we going to deliver to the people that we've actually got? So are we going to do a lot of telling? Are we going to do a lot of demonstration? Are we going to do a lot of involving? Are we going to do a lot of guided discovery? And I've got an example of that shortly. So we've got to adapt our coaching style, as we said. And then every single session, give that athlete, every individual athlete, an opportunity to succeed, whether it be physically, socially, emotionally, some way that they're going to succeed in that session. Nobody wants to leave a session with a head down going, I've failed. If they've failed, you've failed as a coach. Okay, so every athlete needs a challenge. I've seen coaches turn a session around like that. So there might be a load of, you look first at just a group of unruly kids in the corner of a track. Coach turns up, provides a challenge, bang, everyone's switched on. Everyone is in that coach's pocket for the rest of the session because he's provided a fun challenge. They've had fun doing it, and then they're going, what's next? I've really got to listen to this because this is going to be great. And that's part of it. Every athlete is valued. So those are the objectives, outcomes, whatever you want to call them, of your sessions. Really important. So this is kind of a standard template. You'll see this is the top half, and I've made the bottom half a bit more colourful for you, so it's not so boring. But Again, I'm a realist. I know what time you've got, and I know how much initially time this takes. But once you kind of set out your goals, these just all slot into place. And then once you've got one copy of them, all you need to do is just add a little bit every time, and then that becomes your progression. So if you've got a bank of these, whether you've got, you might have it online, you might just have it as old school paper. I've got it on a bit of both. I know a lot of it's in your head sometimes, but it's very useful to have session plans. And this is what it should look like. So you've got to have a date and the time. I should be able to give this to one of my coaching assistants and go, can you deliver this for me? I can't make it. And they go, yep, okay. So we've got the venue, got the rough age group size. Again, we're thinking 12 athletes to one coach. Equipment, so we know what we need to have in our car or in the go and get to the track as soon as we get there before the athletes arrive, so that we don't do that horrible thing of go do 2 laps warm up. Please don't do that while I get the equipment, because if you're not watching the warm up, it's not kind of, if you've seen any of my other webinars, if you're not watching the warm up, you failed, because you can't see if they're tired straight away. So get this equipment out before they're there, and then warm up together and go from there. So then you want your SMART goals as an athlete. What do they want to do? So if I've got a throw SMART goal by the end of the session, I want the athletes to perform a standing throw from a power position using the legs before the arms. Okay, so that's measurable, that's realistic, that's time phased, and hopefully you agree that with your athletes, because what you did last time was you built up as far as that, and now you're just moving on one stage. Okay, and the hurdle goal we've got there, because we've got shot and hurdles, by the end of the session we want to establish our favourite league leg. Those two skills are probably a bit too far apart. That's probably too simple a hurdle drill to be realistic, but that's what we've got. And then you want your how-to goal as a coach. Maybe I need to work on my demonstrations. So by the end of the session, intro, I want to have provided some simple demonstrations. So this is aligned to coach education. That's why it's kind of set out like that, with the what to and the how to. How to is how you deliver. The what to is the actual content of the session, which is mainly what we're focusing on today. So I'll give you a second to take that in. This is an example of one single session. So it's actually the single session from here. So it's on the, where is it? I don't know, on the far right hand side. So that session, so the week 6, session 2. So I'll probably confuse everyone by going back to that, but this is week 6, session 2. So we've got some push throw progression, and we've got some hurdles, and we've got some physical prep. So this is an example of our physical preparation we're going to do. So again, this isn't for this webinar, but so we ramp warm up. I won't go too much into that. So raise heart rate, activate and mobilize the muscles that you're going to use. So what you do in the warm up needs to be relevant to what you're doing the rest of it. And then potentiate. So just before the end of the warm up, you want to be moving at the same speed as you're going to be in the session, if you're doing a running session, or with the same intensity that you then want to go on to in the main session. So our main session, as I say about effectiveness of learning skills, we don't want to make it more than 15, 20 minutes. Otherwise, we're just banging that same drum and we'll end up practicing bad habits. So we're doing a push throw progression. We recap from last time. Again, I can send you these slides because I'm not going to read through the whole thing. That's the kind of thing. We do shot power position, we do some banded drills, and then we do 6 to 8 throws. And then hopefully that will bring us to the stage, our SMART goal that we set at the start. Same with the hurdles. You want your kind of coaching points on there. So on the coaching points for this unit, I've got differentiate the hurdle grid so everyone can join in, being athlete centered, allow athletes to choose their own lane. So that's how I'm going to choose to do my differentiation. I'm going to guide their discovery. So I'm just going to go and play. So I'm going to just let them find their own lead leg, own lane. I'm not going to feed back unless it's dangerous, or then I'm going to do some encouragement feedback as and when I feel it's needed to. And I might feed back differently to different people. Some athletes I might be doing a bit of observation, a bit of telling, if I think it's going to be dangerous, or if I think they're not aware of what they're doing. And some I'm going to be encouraging some self-analysis. So I'm going to be asking open questions. I'm going to be asking them and giving them a scale. How high do you think your trail leg was compared, to 90 degrees, and giving them a scale 1 to 10, or hours on a clock. So that's the different types of feedback I'm going to be using. And then on the far side, on the right hand side, I've got my kind of safety and organisation considerations. Again, this is kind of I won't say perfect because I'm not sure the content is, but this is kind of working example of the kind of thing we expect on coaching education, the kind of detail. But again, I know what real life is like. So I can send you these slides. I'll give you another few seconds to look at it as I waffle on. Oh, let's talk about the physical prep. So if we've got an hour and a half session, 20 minutes warm up. I know that seems like a lot for some people, but the warm up is where we're putting all of our important stuff, our animal crawls, so our ABCs, our agility, balance, coordination, some fundamental movement stuff. That's the most important bit of the session. Then we've got throw, hurdle, and we've got physical prep. So we talked about all those fundamental movements. So today we were doing, by the look of it, hinge. We've got the flamingo, so either body weight or with medicine ball. We've got speed skates, we've got some jumping in there. We've got shuttle run. So if I haven't included running in the main units, I can do some speed in the physical prep or some endurance. So I can just put that in there. So if parents expect their children to come home from training knackered, so they come, what, you didn't do any running, athletics training. So there's always a place to put a little bit of running in, maybe finish with a little bit of running, even if you didn't include it in your main session. But hurdles obviously includes running anyway. So. Then we're doing that overhead pull, so we must be pulling that week as well, and we're doing some planks, so we're doing some brace work, so we're getting 4 or 5 fundamental movements in that physical prep. And then next week will be different, and then the week after will be different. So that's a rough example of what you would include in a single session. So we've gone from huge, we've gone from a macro cycle 1 year, we've gone down to mesocycle, our 8-week period, and then this is a kind of a zoom into one session on that 8-week period, and that's roughly what it would look like. I'm aware of time because I've been talking a lot. It's fine. So just finish with a quote and then we'll take some questions perhaps. I'll let you read it. But so don't necessarily mean by, I don't necessarily, if your goals aren't achieved after 8 weeks or after the season or after another season, why don't we just adjust what we're doing to try and get those goals? Rather than say that's unachievable, why don't we just say, let's adjust the action steps, let's adjust the plan, do, review. So review over short period, review over a big period. Okay, just a little bit of further support reading before we get to a few questions. Welsh Athletics YouTube channel, again, if you've seen me bang on for hours on other webinars, it's all of the webinars that I've done follow a similar thread. It's all kind of that same things. I've done high jump, long jump, so there's a bit more specific content on those, and physical literacy as well. That's kind of relevant to this. Got some England athletics webinars. There's one on planning. I saw some of. That's decent. And then Ryan and Matt, I think, are doing some actually more specific what they actually put in their programs for an 8-week block coming up soon in a few weeks. So I've seen them on the planner. So sign up for those if you want some kind of actual real content. As I say, what I've provided is that guideline of a framework of just hitting everything all the time, and then become more specific as it goes on, but always do everything. Think back to the picture of that discus thrower going over the hurdles. That's the one that is always in my head when, like I say, when parents, it's normally parents you have the problem with, have different expectations of what you're going to deliver to them. If they're bringing little Johnny to the track because he won the school 800 and they see him jumping hurdles, you might also think of that picture and show them that. So that's just some extra stuff. Right, I do have one question already. What is meant by the word load? Good question, because I probably used that and didn't really explain it. Is there a difference between volume and load? No. Yes and no. I'll just read in the next part of the question. Ah, nice, okay. Oh, 3 good questions, right. 3 things I should have explained during the webinar, so the questions about that. So what is meant by the word load? So I think of load as volume, yes. As we talk about loading too much skill, new skill, so that's also load. Anything that is stress on the body, so it could be reps. I think of load as reps, speed. If we're doing hurdles at speed, that's bigger load than just going over some hurdle drills. So we need to reduce the number of reps we do at speed because the load will be greater if we're doing them at speed. So it's reps, it's load, it's weight. If we're lifting weights, it's anything that produces stress on the body. So that's what I mean by load. So volume is load, the amount of reps, the amount of speed you use, the amount of times you do it, and the distance you go, etc. That's what I mean by load. To profile an athlete, what process should I go through, and how often should I re-profile an athlete? I think that depends on the athlete is the easy answer, but it's not really an answer. It's you talk to them, maybe you design a questionnaire, something I used to do and I do for the younger ones, design a questionnaire mainly to find out what other sports they do, because otherwise you don't really know. You see them twice a week at club, you don't really know their mum and dad or their family, they just turn up twice a week. And you go, okay, I'm going to use that word load. I think this load is appropriate because we did this last week and we're doing this next week and I'm doing this in the next session. So I think this load is appropriate, but not knowing that which is why you watch them in the warm-up as well, not knowing that they've done it a rugby tournament that day and they do hockey training 3 days a week. So it's done during the summer normally, or whenever you first meet an athlete, and then you just adjust it a little bit every single time you get the opportunity. So if they tell you something else, you just add it to the profile, cross something out, put it on. Right, they've given up rugby, they've taken up football, they've just been selected to play for Wales netball. So you just add to it as you go. So there's no real kind of reassessment in that. I think that answers that one. And I've gone to this third question. I've got, what is a hurdle grid? Good question. By a hurdle grid, I just mean 5 hurdles, and I kind of wrote it in the description, but I didn't put it. So you've got 5 hurdles in the line. That's like a row of hurdles. And then you've got 5 lower hurdles, and then you've got 5 lower hurdles with slightly shorter spacing. So that's basically a rectangle full of hurdles, but it's basically 3 lines of hurdles. That's what I mean by a hurdle grid. So, and that's where we get our differentiation from in sessions. On our guided discovery, we say, have a play over those hurdles, see which one you can do the stride pattern for, see which one you feel most comfortable. And if you feel comfortable there, do you fancy going to the next ones? And no, I don't, fine. Just allow us that self-discovery, that guided discovery, and only feedback if you need to. And as I say, all the different types of feedback, I won't repeat myself, but you use different types of feedback with different athletes. So yeah, that's a good question. Right, let's see if I've got any questions on. Here we are. Again, I'm conscious not to keep you all too long. If you do have any questions that come to mind this evening as you're thinking about what an excellent webinar it was, lying in bed, just drop me an email. My email's down the bottom there, or just when I see you about, grab me or phone me up. My phone number is on my email. I thought I knew how to undock this. There we go. Right. No questions. Okay, any more questions? Zoe, I know Zoe's online.
No, that's everything, Finn. Great webinar. Good insights, mate. Cool.
Right, thank you, everybody. As I say, I didn't expect anyone to turn up to, especially on such a hot evening. I've just finished a Zoom with some of the athletes. I know it's Grace, you're on here. Where were you? Well, I know it's a day off, but you should have been on the Zoom. Hello, Mum. Thanks for tuning in. I'm not sure any of that content was relevant for you in particular, but thanks for the moral support. And yeah, as I say, I always appreciate people coming in live. I know these are a resource on YouTube, but thanks very much. And give me a shout if you need anything explaining. Take care.